right, so to continue on last week's theme, I was going to talk just a little more about Endgames today. So let me bring up part 2. All right, and I don't remember if I mentioned it last time, but some of my sources, I took some of the games from there's a book from Chess Evolution called Most Instructive Endgames of 2012-2015. It's very interesting. They have all kinds of books and resources. Chess Evolution is like a venture by some strong GMs, like I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but the German Arkady Naidish. I'm probably butchering his name, but I don't speak German, so maybe one of you maybe you speak German here. I'm just curious.
I took German.
Luigi Jack.
It spells Naiditsch. Would you know how to pronounce that?
What's the first one letter thing?
Naid, and then
NAID.
ITSEH.
yeah,
I've heard it pronounced Nightitch, but I don't know.
Naidish. Okay,
No, probably Nadish.
Naidish. Okay. I haven't heard that many people say his name, so I wasn't sure what the right way of saying it was. Okay, so anyway, he along with other kind of around 2,700 GMs put together this very interesting series. So that's good, and I also used Dvoretsky's Endgame book too. Um, now Dvoretsky's book can get a lot more complicated than the stuff I've talked about, but he does cover some very basic stuff. So one interesting thing is, whoops, yeah, let me turn Stockfish off. Sorry, I don't know why that was on. Although it could be interesting to see its evaluations, but anyway, I saw this position last weekend at Center 64. I saw a couple players playing. I actually forget the names of the players who were playing. One of the black was a scholastic player and white was an older adult player. In any case, it's black to move, and just so you know, black lost this game. But
no.
It's in John's position.
yes, but it didn't have to be. If you remember from last week, this should look pretty familiar to a
Yeah.
position we looked at, right? So black to play can draw, but you have to find the right move. How does black draw here? Yeah, exactly. Bishop b7.
Yeah.
All you have to do is keep in mind the rule. What were the two things you have to do with the bishop?
Attack and block.
Exactly. Attack one pawn and stop the advance of the other. And bishop e7 is the only move that stops f6 and attacks g5. So there's no way white can make progress because king h5, you just play bishop d8, and you just wait. And if
F6.
and if f6, you just take it.
Oh yeah.
See, in the game, tragically, white played bishop c1,
Oh no.
but after f6, white is now just completely winning. For instance, king f7. I didn't see the whole game, but for instance, king f7, king f5, and now there's nothing black can do, right? If you try something like this, I guess white plays g6. For instance, something like this is going to happen when white promotes, right? But yeah, very very sad. But I was very excited to see that this position occurred. I just finished my game. I look over and I see this, and I'm just like, please play bishop e7. It's like, but it wasn't to be. So anyway, just interesting. Maybe it was just pure luck, but these kind of things really do happen in games.
Why
So.
does Stockfish stays +1?
You give it more time though.
I mean, that's the thing about computers is that, according to Stockfish, I guess bishop b2 draws, but I guess that must be just the nature of the position or something. But as a general rule, bishop b7 is the right way to go. But anyway, yeah, computers you can't really trust at endgames. I mean, for example, if you make up a rook and knight versus rook endgame and put it in the engine is going to say, yeah, with the knight you're better, but it doesn't mean anything. Yeah, you have a question?
There was a game. It was in a game or a middle game, I forgot. And like Carlson basically created a computer move. And
He created one? What does that mean?
like the computer suggested a different move that would just be winning. Well, like slightly winning. But he made a different move and then that like completely.
So he found a move the computer didn't think was good, basically.
Like he beat a computer move. Like
So you mean he
He
played
made
a?
more moves than the computer.
Okay, yeah, no, that definitely happens. I mean, we saw an instance in the last lecture, right, in that bot Bennett game, that final game we looked at, where Stockfish didn't see the winning idea, until you let it run for quite a while, right? Um, so yeah, that's not for a single move. That's not really unthinkable for sure, especially in the end game. Um, so yeah. Anyway, it was fun seeing this. By the way, I have a funny story of. There was a game in the World Computer Chess Championship. So I'm not sure how often it happens, but every now and then they'll have a championship to duke it out between all the chess computers, right? You'll have Houdini and Stockfish and Komodo, right, all playing. And there was one game where one computer had a knight and rook versus a rook, right? And one computer that had the knight and rook sacked his rook for nothing. And everyone was shocked. And to the computer, it made no difference. It was 0.00 before, and after I had the knight versus rook end game, it was still 0.00. So just kind of no human would ever just sack the rook for nothing, right? But to the computer, it made no difference. So, just random story there.
For these tournaments, computer versus computer, now it's always draws, right?
No.
Oh no, there's a big difference at that level, even, yeah.
Yeah.
And what's amusing too is they're allowed to tweak the engines before the games to like the aggression level or something like that. So you'll see a computer playing like a garbage opening just to get a complicated position, and then it'll somehow outplay the other one. I mean, it's unbelievable seeing Stockfish getting crushed in 20 moves or something. But
now I gotta bench watch Stockfish losing tournaments.
okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is same colored bishops as opposed to opposite colored bishops, and um, what I want you to teach you guys in this game is about breakthroughs. Okay. So this is a game between Leonard Dominguez and Caruana. If you don't know, Dominguez is a very strong Cuban player. He's been their top players for years. Okay. So anyway, it's white to play, and by the way, you'll note it's a very interesting endgame. White has count it, three pairs of doubled pawns, and every single pawn white has is isolated. But despite this, white is still winning. You have a question?
No, couldn't Bishop just take d4?
Oh, okay, yeah. So um, the the question is though how to break through in this position, right? And the point I want to get across is that a lot of times in games you have to sacrifice something to break through to get a key square, for example.
So
Now,
Is that
here you can break through by pushing on b6, and then you can.
yeah, b6 is a very important idea here because you need to be 5 square for your king. And if you just think about it just in a simple sense, in reality, the b pawn doesn't really have much value to you because you're not going to make a queen out of it, right? If you ever push it, black can just take it. So it's not exactly like you're giving up a future queen. So the b pawn isn't really too relevant. Uh, so try to think of your material in that sense. Sometimes your own material gets in the way, so you have to sack it. Yeah.
um? This is. I don't know if you really want to sack the bishop, but if you're saying you want to free the b pawn after you
Sacking the bishop.
after you take d4, what would black do?
After you take d4.
Mm-hmm.
So see, I don't think he didn't take on d4. What would black do? I mean, I'm not sure if this really changes the valuation of the position.
I don't think so.
Actually, never mind. It does. c5. Now you lose.
Oh, okay.
I remember there was a reason why white didn't just take on d4. So yeah, tactical reason. So yeah. Um, so b6 is important. Now king b4 would have been okay, I guess, but it doesn't really make progress. I mean, winning the d4 pawn doesn't free your position somehow, right? I mean, do you see how winning the d pawn doesn't really let you make progress? So that's why b6 is important. So we get the b5 square for the king. And one thing you should notice too is that now that the kings are on b5 and b7, whatever black does, he's basically going to have to move with the bishop. or a pawn or something. Because if black plays king c7, king a6 is going to be devastating.
Yep.
And if king a7, king c6 is going to be devastating because then the king can take on d6 or take all the kingside pawns. So you're creating a situation for zugzwang. And of course, white's going to have a lot more moves than black. So now white picks up the d4 pawn, but this isn't really that important because it doesn't really give white a passer, right? It's only going to help with respect to zugzwang. So now white won b6. Now, for the record, black had no way to defend it. If black had played bishop c7 to hold on to the b pawn, how would white play here?
Bishop f2.
A bishop f2, bishop d8.
Oh.
Remember, you want to create zugzwang.
What's this thing do on thing?
Oh, sorry, bishop f6.
Yeah.
Oh.
So now bishop d8 is not possible. And, black could play something like bishop b8, but then you could play bishop d8, for instance. And then after bishop a7, you could play d4.
Wow.
And now it's zugzwang, right? So that's why black gave him the b pawn. He couldn't defend it anyway. But although white has won the b pawn, the game is not over. White actually can't win with just the b pawn. Black can shuffle his bishop, and you can't force the b pawn home to queen. So there's still work to do. Not a trivial win yet. So yet again, white wins the h pawn, but again, it doesn't make a difference because we can't force pass pawn on the king side yet.
But you can take maybe d6 can target, right?
Well, yeah, if we could win d6, that would be great. Unfortunately, we can't force it. But anyway, I do want to note it's just an interesting endgame. White's won 3 pawns in a row here with b6, d4, and h4, but still white only has 1 passed pawn. Having all those doubled isolated pawns sure hurts.
Now can you sack the bishop on, say, e5?
On a5.
e5.
Oh, yeah, bishop b5 could be an idea sometimes. Yeah, that's a good point. Whenever you're in end games with limited number of pieces or anything like that and lots of pawns, it's worth it to sometimes sacrifice just to get a passer. So that's
Connected passers, too.
yeah, exactly. So that's definitely a good idea to keep in mind for sure. So yeah, you notice white plays bishop f2. You might think that's a really bizarre idea to not defend the pawn, but if you play bishop g5 or bishop g3, then your own bishop is just stuck defending.
Yeah.
Okay. And by the way, our f pawn wasn't exactly a future queen, so it doesn't matter. So the king now has to move to the king side. And you may wonder why the king is wandering over there, but white has a breakthrough. h5. So if black plays g5, we have a passer, and if black takes, we have bishop h4. And after black moves a bishop, white played a few moves, but it doesn't matter. We can now win h5, and then we win the f pawn shortly after. So in the end game, these pseudo sacrifices where you give up a pawn just to get a square is very, very common. So notice white did it twice this game. White played b6 just to get the b5 square for his king. Then he later played h5 just to get h4 for the king. So when you're end game, think about these ideas. How you can improve your position. Because if we go back here, if white doesn't play h5, there's actually no way white can win this position. The king can never get in here because e5 and g5 are covered. So h5 is seriously the only way to break through here. So yeah, and after
I doubt any of us would end up in this position.
you doubt you would. I mean, yes, it is an extreme example, but you may end up in a position that's less extreme, but you still have to execute this kind of idea. Yeah, white executed the same idea like multiple times is very unusual, but in a less exotic position, this kind of idea is very common, and we will see an example later too. That's not quite so extreme. But anyway, yeah, at this point now it's pretty much trivial. White wins the f pawn and the h pawn, and white plays king e6, f5, and it's a pretty simple win since black will have to give it the bishop for a pawn. So yeah, that's a really nice endgame there. Do you have any questions about that, guys? Okay. So that was a fun bishop endgame, and now we're going to look
Wait,
at a
actually,
rook endgame. Yeah?
um, couldn't White have tried to trade bishops earlier? Or shouldn't they have wanted to?
So trade bishops. So let's see at one point you were thinking that. I mean, I'm not sure there was ever the option, right? Um, in any case, you're wondering if black would want to trade bishops?
No, Black wouldn't want.
Right, black wouldn't want to because it'd be a lost king and pawn in game, right? Um, yeah, so your question was why didn't white try or something?
Yeah.
I don't think white ever really had a great chance to offer a trade. I mean, white did offer a trade at this point, but of course black declined.
Well, like, if White offered a trade,
Yeah, I mean, white did offer a trade multiple times, but of course black declined every time as he had to.
well, it's kind of
So,
would have trade bishops if Black chose that trade bishops.
but okay, next let's look at a rook endgame, and this one is really instructive actually. So again, Dominguez is black, and or not again, but this time he's black. Again on the better side anyway. So black to play. What do you guys think he should do? Just for the record, they just recently traded into this endgame now. Black has an extra pawn, and he's attacking h2, but white does have a passed b pawn. So anyway, black to play. What should you do? Yeah,
Couldn't you just take the H1?
you could take h2. But there is a problem with that. What do you think white would do?
Just
Pass.
rook
Yeah.
b3 and go up.
Exactly. So, as you should know from some previous endgame lectures, when you have a passed pawn, you want the rook behind it. So now rook b3, and black actually has to put the rook in prison in order to not let white queen. Black has to play, for instance, rook d2, b6, b7, and rook b8.
Yeah, now it's
And since black's rook cannot move, this is actually just an easy draw for white. White can now usher the king towards the king side, for instance, king g2, and have something like g5, rook b6, and just move the king up. And there's no way black can make progress here.
but it's not a win for white.
No, it's not a win for white, because there's no way for if white tries to move the king over to the queen side to win the rook, then black can start pushing the pawns. But yeah, it's like a positional stalemate, you could say. Neither side can make progress. So yeah, let that be a lesson to you. In terms of keeping your rook active. Even though black is up 2 pawns, he's unable to win because his rook is not playing. Right, so passive. So black understood this and instead played rook b2. Very principled, right? You want your rook behind the passed pawn.
But now if rook d5.
Yeah, rook d5 was what white played. It's only move, and now black can take h2.
Because he can't put the
Oh,
behind.
You
nice.
see the difference now. White took an e5. If now b6, rook b2, and our rook gets behind the passed pawn, right? White would have to play something like rook d6 to defend the pawn, and having your rook laterally defend the pawn like that, it's really not ideal. It's not really helpful. So very nice precision from Dominguez there. So white took an e5, now rook b2. Now, of course, I guess the downside for black is they did lose a potential passed pawn. But, this way at least his rook isn't so passive. So white gives up the f3 pawn, again with the exact same idea as before of getting the rook behind the passed pawn, but white's sneaky this time. King c2. So white is ready to play b6 and rook b5, and again, anchor that black rook in total passivity. So surprisingly enough, even though again black is up 2 full pawns, black has no way to win because his rook is not playing. And a draw. So, but that's seriously a really important idea. You could be in a rook endgame and you could be down a couple pawns, but if you have a passed pawn, put your rook behind it and just push it. If you can anchor your opponent's rook to just sitting there blocking the pawn, then you should have no problems drawing the game. If your opponent's rook is not playing, then they can't really make progress. So it's a really important idea for you guys. And likewise, if you're up material, try not to let your opponent get that kind of counterplay by tying your rook down to just doing nothing. Okay, and now a nice game from Mamadiara. So before on the theme of, well, I'm not going to tell you the theme actually. I want you guys to find this move. But it goes back to what you were saying earlier. All right. So white to play and win. This is a game between Mamadiarov and Gelfand. And white's been kind of pushing the whole game here. White has this nice edge because of the active rook and black's weak pawn at a6. But it's still not easy. So what's the easiest way to win for white?
Is it another sack?
Well, maybe not.
It's like the rook sack on.
So give yourself a couple minutes and think about how white can win.
Possible.
Yeah.
Rook a7. I don't think that's good because of rook b4 and then rook a4.
Oh, okay.
For instance, rook a7 check. Say here, and if you take on a6, then you lose a piece, right?
G4.
No, g4. Black would probably play h takes.
Rook takes c5.
Yeah, rook takes c5. Exactly. If you go back to what Lucas said earlier on the first endgame, he talked about sacrificing the bishop for a passed pawn, right? And looking at this position, the only way forward for white is to get a passed pawn. If you don't get a passed pawn, you're not going to be able to win this. You're not going to win the kingside pawns, and in tactics, trying to win the queenside pawns just don't work. Just for instance, if you play rook c6, black has king e7, and if you take, for example, rook a8, and then once you move the bishop, black takes the pawn, and white hasn't made any progress. All you've done is manage to exchange a pawns. So rook takes c5 is exactly what's needed. And not only do we win a pawn after d takes, king takes, but now a6 is falling.
Oh.
So we're really getting two passed pawns that are pretty far advanced in return for the exchange. And it turns out this is more than enough here for white to win. And the tactics work out very nicely for white too. Now, for example, king takes d5 might be tempting, but it's going to cost black the rook because after a6, there's really nothing black can do to stop the pawn.
Why not rook a2?
Rook
Oh,
where?
Yeah, but then you bring the...
Yeah, like for example, if you play rook a2, then a7, and white threatens bishop a6, cutting off the a file.
Oh, wow.
And then there's nothing black can do. If you play rook b2, white just moves the king, and you can't go to b8. Just for example. So this is a big problem for black. So unfortunately, can't take on d5, but these two pawns are just too much anyway. Yeah, black sacked a pawn to get a passer, just how you saw earlier. White sacked to get a passer, but with three passed pawns, that's just too much. And black resigned because on rook takes a6, white can queen, and if king takes, queen again would check, and giving white a trivial win there. So yeah, that's a really common idea in games too. You'll sacrifice something to get a passed pawn or two just to get things rolling. Sometimes it'll even just be a full piece, like Lucas mentioned earlier. That's a very common idea too. If you're really far advanced pawns, just try to sack something for what's blockading it. Okay. Now I included this one for defending rook endgames. This one's very instructive. Okay. So Andrekin's playing this one now. Who do you guys think is better here, black or white? Who has the better endgame?
white.
Yeah, white is clearly better, you know.
King position, pass pawn.
Yeah, white's king is more centralized. The d pawn is already passed. Black doesn't even have a pass pawn yet. So yeah, white is clearly in the driver's seat. But all is not lost for black. It's really nice to see how black defends. So first starts out with king f7. The king is a piece in the endgame. You know, you need to have this active. So king f7 is very important. And keep in mind too, you know, at the moment black can't get the rook behind the pass pawn. But if you can't do that in a rook endgame, your second best bet is have your king defend the queening square of the pass pawn, right? We know this from, excuse me, the fill door position, right? It's a draw if you just have your king controlling the queening square. So that's a very important idea. So king f7 was a big move. If white didn't do this, if black didn't do this, white would push the pawn and the black rook would be stuck in passivity. And then rook e2 was a very nice idea for white. Do you understand what Gelfand was trying to do with this move? First point is tactical, by the way. If black tries to keep centralizing the king, then white wins.
Oh yeah. With the discovery.
King f3. and if king f5, rook e5, and we win the rook. So rook e2 has that tactical point. But the other point is that if black does nothing here, white's, for instance, if black played h5, white would play king d3, and this would cut off the black king from getting to the queening square. So very, very sneaky idea. So black played rook g6, a nice move in return, with the idea of blocking on the e file so that he can move the king over. Just a very nice idea. So really, really logical chess on both sides. And yeah, if white were to trade, this would actually, let's see, I think this is probably a draw, but black is on the better end.
Yeah.
Because, well, why is black better here? Maybe you guys can tell me.
Because of the connected.
No?
How do you position?
Nope. In king and pawn games, you want the outside pass pawn.
Oh.
So, black will play h5, g5, and push that pawn, force white's king to catch it over there, and meanwhile, black will win white's d-pawn and ransack the queenside. Now, unfortunately for black, it's going to be a draw because once you take on a2, white's king is going to move over to c2 and hem in your king. So, it is a draw, but white's kind of living on the edge going into this endgame. So yeah, white's definitely not going to change rooks. So yeah, if you didn't already know that about king and pawn in games, remember that idea. The outside pass pawn is the better one, not the central one. It's about diverting the enemy king to the edge of the board where it's useless, right? Or to just the other side of the board. Right? Okay, so anyway, white avoids the exchange of rooks, but this allows the black king to help stop the d-pawn. Now black, of course, starts advancing on the king side to get his own pass pawn, and yeah, usually you don't want your rook blocking your own pawn, but in this case, black is, trying to defend his a pawn tactically here. So white has 2 extra pass pawns, but just like we saw before, black is going to force the white rook into passivity, and so white's not going to be able to win this endgame. And now it's just a draw because we have a classic fill door position, right? Whoops.
Should be fine.
Okay. So yeah, if you don't know how to draw the fill door position, you can go to a past lecture or just go to Wikipedia. There's actually a lot of it's really simple, right? You keep the rook on the 3rd rank until white pushes the pawn to the 6th. Then you move the rook to the back and just check forever, right? Since the white king can't hide. That's just a really quick, easy summary of how to draw this. Okay. Now we'll go on to a different topic of queen endgames. And this one was very interesting. So after a really crazy middle game, we ended up with this endgame here. Now, black is up a lot of pawns, especially after this move queen g4. Black wins even more pawns with check. Now, interesting thing about queen endgames is that it doesn't really matter how many pawns each side has. What matters is the quality of the pawns. And what I mean is basically how far advanced they are. So even though black has, 3 extra pawns here, it doesn't matter because white's pawn at f6 is further advanced than any of black's. And so that threat of queening is far more important.
Here there's a checkmate threat.
Yeah.
too.
And yeah, it makes it even trickier because white's threatening queen g7 mate, right? So just keep that in mind in queen endgames. You know, if they're notoriously kind of drawish because of the perpetual checks you can give, and because even if you're down lots of pawns, like in this case, white's down 3 pawns, white's really at no risk of losing because not only besides perpetual check possibilities, but you can just push your pawn and force black to check you to stop you from queening. Yeah, Carter.
Wouldn't black always have to get into a really good position to block off that queen, or always check the king, so white doesn't checkmate? Because the king can't move; it's trapped. So doesn't the white queen and the black queen have to like get into a position where it blocks off g7, and or always check white's king?
Well, yeah, it does. It's the black queen is going to have to get to the g file, and black's also going to have to give his king some room to go up, play like h4 or something, right? So yeah, you're right. Unfortunately, it doesn't help him because when white moves the queen away with check and then plays f7, that threat to queen is very dangerous. So black is going to have no real choice but to keep checking. So anyway, black played a bunch of checking moves. It's not really too interesting until black decides he wanted to try to play for a win since he had so many extra pawns. He thought he could play for a win. So black finally managed to get the queen to the g file. So queen g7 mate is not an idea, and now black has the h5 square for his king. So after queen f8, he played king h5. Turns out, by the way, king h5 was actually losing surprisingly. He should have just played like king h7. It was perpetual check. Now queen e8, king g4, and queen e2. This was a really nice idea. Now, what black was hoping for, by the way, was f7, king f3, queen g8, and king f2. Such a sick idea. Yeah, so black threatens queen h3 mate, and so white has to take. Now king takes. Now queen. And even though white has a queen, black has 2 consecutive checks. g2 check, g1 queen check, and after king h3 mate. So that's a really funny finish. So I guess that's what black was aiming for.
But no.
But yeah, unfortunately, white saw queen e2. And now king f4, f7. Black has to stop the pawn somehow. And now it's white's turn to mess up. So white played f8 queen, but it's just perpetual check after that. The white king can't get away. But white had a win in queen b8. And now queen g8. The whole point of bringing the queen to g8 is that the queen can now block in the g file. Right? So white now threatens just f8 queen, and if you play something like queen e4 now, just by the way, if you play queen f3, white has queen g2, and if queen d1, queen g1 check is important. If queen g1 wasn't with check, then this wouldn't be winning. That was, by the way, the whole point of queen b8. That's kind of weird looking check. Given I'm not surprised white missed this. This is super deep, but still, pretty cool idea. And going back, if black played queen e4, it doesn't make any difference because after king h3 here, black has no more checks. That was the other advantage of playing queen b8 is now the king blocks the third rank, so there's no checks along there. But anyway, after white queens, now the king has no protection, so it's just perpetual check. But yeah, just keep it in mind in queen endgames. It's not so much that it's a drawing technique. It's more like understanding when you can bail out to a queen endgame. Okay, so if you have some extra pawns, realize that if you're going into a queen endgame, it's more than likely not going to be winning for you. Okay, even if you have extra pawns, because perpetual check ideas, and if your opponent has a pass pawn especially, then it's probably not going to be winning for you. So something worth keeping in mind. All right. So remember that too. If you have fewer pawns and you have a pass one, just push it, and just like the rook end games, try to ping your opponent's queen down. Get perpetual checks. Okay. Now I have one last one, and this one is actually my favorite. Okay. So this one is actually kind of more like a middle game concept than a end game concept, I suppose. But nonetheless, it's worthwhile looking at. So, uh, white to play. What's the best move? I'll just phrase it like that. So, take a couple minutes and think about how white should continue. So at this point, if you don't really have any great ideas or anything,
An
I'll
idea.
um,
Putting a rook on the a5.
well, okay. So you want to play like Rook A1 or Rook A3? Um, in either case, I think Black can play Rook takes D6, and it may not be easy for Black to defend, but I don't necessarily see a way forward for White. So to phrase this a little bit differently, and you should always be thinking about this during the middle game and end game is, how to make all your pieces active, how to improve your pieces.
The bishop is terrible
Yeah, your white bishop on F1 is terrible, but at the same time, it's not necessarily easy to figure out, how you can improve that piece. I mean, maybe you could get it to A4 or something, but that's going to take a great deal of time, and probably not going to be that helpful
here.
anyway.
Putting your knight on e5.
Yeah, knight on E5 would be great, but unfortunately, Black can play F6. Like if you play knight G4 here, Black can play like F6, and then all your dreams are dashed, right? But I like the way you're thinking. So looking at this position, knight on E3 is actually one of your worst pieces. It's not doing anything to help you, right? C4 does not need defending. Besides that, it's not doing anything. So what square could that knight be on? That would be pretty awesome.
B3
Yeah, exactly. So if you want that knight on B3, well,
takes 3 moves.
yeah, it takes a couple moves, but so what do you start with?
Knight
C2.
C2
Exactly, yeah.
to knight A1.
So white played knight C2, just really, really strong move, so nice. And on the palm now, do knight D6, knight
Why
D1.
don't black take a rook?
Taking the rook wouldn't make much difference. You could play,
Just,
well, you don't even have to play rook takes. You could play knight A1,
yeah.
and it's hard to tell black how to defend C5 after knight B3.
Yeah.
So he played knight takes, but still after knight B3, hard to say how he defends everything. Now the knight's on B7, but just like the situation with the rooks, you don't want your piece's purpose in life to be just blocking past pawns, and here's no different. Uh, white gets a long diagonal for the bishop, and now white wins a piece for the pawn, since there's no way to stop B7 now. So I just thought it was amazing. Originally when you see that position, black's about to win back the D6 pawn. It looks like it's going to be even, but it was not to be. White just had to improve the position of that knight, and it was over that quickly. But yeah, that's definitely a worthwhile idea to think about in your own games too. Always be thinking, what pieces do I have that aren't helping? How can I make them better?
Is this over? Or what?
Yeah, black just resigned at this point. There's no way to stop B7, right?
Yeah, but then you can take and it's easier to.
Well, white has a piece for a pawn, right? That's generally not too difficult of a win.
I can usually figure out which piece needs improving and where it needs to go, but what I have a hard time with is understanding if I have the time to get it there.
Yeah.
That's the hard calculation. Because there, I mean, you see it, you go, well, if I could move it instantly there, that would be an amazing move. But do I have enough time to play 3 moves to get it there?
Oh, that's a good point.
And you did.
Yeah, in this case, white had the time. Yeah. I mean, one thing going back to original position too. Um, as much as you'd love to keep D6. No matter what move you make here, is white black's gonna take it. And part of playing knight C2, A1, B3 as well in this particular case is your rook on D3 is defended by the bishop and the rook, so black's not gonna just win it. So yeah, I guess this is a simple case of having enough time to do it. But yeah, I guess that's the tricky part in chess where strategy and tactics meet, right?
Yeah, one thing that helps though is understanding that your bishop defends your rook, so even though the pawn's going to fall, the rest of your stuff is fine.
Yeah. But yeah, this was my favorite one though. I think it's the coolest. I mean, psychologically, it can be hard to move your pieces backwards as well.
So what does
Yeah.
white play if knight c2, knight takes, knight a1, and then knight takes c4?
Well, the knight can't move because
Oh, they
the rook hangs.
Yeah, that's bad. That is nice.
But I mean, I guess even here it would be slower, but something like rook d2 would be playable. If you didn't see that, now you can still play knight a1 b3. It would give the black king more time to run over and help, stop the pawn, but it would still be good for white, I think. So yeah, I hope these general tips help you in the end game. For helping you draw worse end games or win winning ones, right? Um, so any questions, you guys? Cool. Just a reminder too. The one of the biggest things you guys can do to improve is play serious tournament games and whoops, figure out what you did wrong and not repeat your same mistakes. All right. Thanks, guys.